Well, good morning, guys. Hope you're all well. As Natasha mentioned, my name is Liz Dowling. I work with startups and scale-ups that are going from the hundreds to the thousands. Works in the UK, EMEA, US, and APAC. And obviously, a lot of once we've kind of like got people to the door, a lot of it involves onboarding. And quite often as well reboarding individuals, because the businesses that I'm working with are going through quite a lot of change quite quickly. So the proposition and the conditions and everything are changing all the time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what my experience has been in terms of how you can run onboarding and really kind of, I suppose, make some quick changes and get some quick wins in place that will then give you the leverage to invest in tools and technology and really elevate the importance of it.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I think you've got a few stats in the next slide, haven't you? Just a little bit about the importance of onboarding for those of you who aren't aware.
Yeah, sure. So I think that everyone is very well aware now that onboarding is massive. So these are some stats that I think are really important. We can one of the things that when I started looking into the importance of getting budget and getting the business to get behind onboarding, one of the things that really stood out for me is that 22% of employee turnover occurs within an individual's first 40 days. And I was astonished and had never really kind of like witnessed that. But then when I started to interrogate the data in the businesses that I worked for, it seemed quite consistent. What's amazing as well is that one thing that it just blows my mind is that companies that run structured onboarding programs outperform their peers by 93% in terms of financial performance. So that's massive opportunity, and that's why I think that onboarding could be your secret weapon, keeping in line with the James Bond theme. And I don't suppose it's any shock that companies who do run a pre-boarding program have improved productivity, because everybody knows where they're going, what they're doing, what they're focused on. And also because you're kind of like bringing in the entire business to get involved in the onboarding program, it increases employee engagement by up to 54%. And it also tends to reinforce those key messages from a vision and value point of view, and really build some infrastructure around your business rituals or DNA. So if we hop to the next slide. So what's quite interesting is, and I'll ask, I don't know if you think about, it'd be good to like kind of throw this out to the room. When do you believe that onboarding begins and who owns it? And maybe if I do a show of hands, do you think it begins from off a stage?
Hands right up. Sorry, you won't be able to see everyone, Liz, but that's probably about 3/4 of the room, I'd say.
3/4 of the room. Okay, from when the recruiter takes the brief?
No? No one? No one.
No one. Okay, interesting. Because I really believe that for successful onboarding, it all begins with the recruitment piece. So one of the first things that I'll ask a hiring manager when I'm taking a brief is, what are the things that you're going to expect from this person in their first 90 days? What are those 3 key goals that they're going to have to achieve? And that obviously like forms part of their first 90 days, but it also then builds in those elements into the hiring process. Because suddenly what I find is that you go through the hiring process and you might recruit someone that's right for the role and has the right skill sets, but actually if you look at what they've got to achieve in the 90 days and what's going to make them successful in terms of passing their probation, they might not have that experience in the past. So I think it's really important that we're thinking about onboarding from the time that the brief is opened. So that's one thing that has made onboarding more successful in the businesses that I've worked for, is making it clear when you're going through the hiring process that you're actually assessing people on delivery of those goals that they've got to achieve during their first 90 days. Pre-boarding as well. How many of you guys have got a proactive pre-boarding plan?
Hands right up for me. I think there's about 5 or 6 people with hands half up, so I'm not sure if that's a definite pre-boarding plan, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that what successful businesses, if you look at I suppose like the showcase companies, they make sure that all of the background work and all of like the paperwork and all the nonsense and is all dealt with before an individual lands on day one, so that on their first day they can really talk about the business goals, the vision, the values. They can get bought into the longer term plan. Because what I've seen in a lot of organisations is that actually most people spend their first day finding out where the fire exit is, and have they got the right paperwork, and why haven't they signed this contract, and do they want to opt in or out of pensions, etc. And for me, that's a real it's not the greatest welcome for someone. So I think that it would be good that when they start on day one, if all of the administrative and boring pieces are out of the way, and that's done in advance. Really, where I've had really good success in the past is where we've asked people to actually have a pre-boarding experience almost. So in the month before they start, they'll come in, they'll meet the team. They will perhaps have a one-to-one with the hiring manager. They will read through the employee handbook. They will sign all their paperwork. Also, if I'm working with regulated companies, they'll do all their DBS checks. If they're in finance or areas like that, perhaps they might make sure that they're transferring over their certifications. So all of that is out of the way, and then day one really can be about giving them a really amazing welcome and first start. And one thing that stood out to me as well is that I'm not sure, does everybody do onboarding on a Monday?
Tuesdays,
okay, fantastic. That's good, because that's Monday's a really bad day. Everyone's like running around like headless chickens. Quite often got the like weekend blues. So it's not the greatest time to be welcoming people into the business. So it's great that people have already started to think about moving that on. Another part that is interesting is who. So I'll chuck this out again as well. Who owns the onboarding process? So in some businesses, it's talent acquisition. In other businesses, it's HR. And in some smaller companies, it's the hiring manager. What is the majority of you, is it owned by talent acquisition?
So hands up for talent acquisition. 2, 3 people. Okay, HR.
Okay, cool.
And then yeah, so there was quite a few people that didn't put their hand up. So where were we? So it's a joint ownership. Okay, joint ownership was probably half the room, I would say.
Okay, great. That's good. So because it does, like I like to use the expression, it takes a village, because obviously there's so many people that are involved in the onboarding process, from finance through to operations through to facilities. So making sure that I think there has to be a clear handover from talent acquisition to HR in terms of the process, but also making sure that the hiring manager is really involved in it. I think that it's not specifically a HR issue. I also think the leadership need to become very invested in it, and they need to really elevate and champion it in the business. so that new starters get a really good experience, but also you're having that kind of like real connection and bond with them. So when does it end? So I've seen a lot of companies that focus on the first week, or the first month, or the first 3 months. So it'd be interesting to find out from yourselves. Don't know quite how we'll ask this in terms of house, but is there is there anybody that actually looks at onboarding as a continuous program, and extends it past the first 90 days or past the probation period?
Yeah, four hands.
4 hands. Okay. So really and truly, I personally believe that onboarding should be like kicking off your whole L&D journey and career with an organisation, and that yes, there are certain check-ins that you need to go through in the first 30, 60, 90 days, but really in those first 3 months you should be having conversations with people that about like, where do you want to be long term, what's your ultimate goal, really building that connection with them, but also getting them to think about it from a long-term point of view, and not just focus on getting through their probation review, and making sure that they are building skills and knowledge across the business that are longer term, rather than, I call it kind of like cramming to just get through the first 90 days. Also as well, I think it's really important that one thing that I think we're quite poor at is reboarding individuals. So as we all work in businesses that are going through a lot of transformation at the moment, people are being asked to constantly kind of like work outside of their skill set. Perhaps they started the business 5 years ago, perhaps they've been on sabbatical, perhaps they've been on maternity leave, perhaps they've worked in a different office. So I think it's really important that we run consistent boot camps or updates for people to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because otherwise you can find that new starters have been given a great experience and had spent time with the leadership on a one-to-one basis, understanding the new vision, the values, the roadmap of where the business is going. But someone who's been with the business for 4 or 5 years perhaps hasn't had that same experience. So people can be working off 2 different narratives. So I think that's
And a question for you, Liz, on the reboarding, yeah, does that improve the retention essentially as well? Have you seen a sort of direct correlation between reboarding and a retention of those employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that you're almost, when you have a great onboarding experience, you feel invested in. The whole, I think that every onboarding should be an opportunity to build a great customer, candidate, employee experience. It's about building those connections with people. So if you are reboarding individuals and constantly giving them the opportunity to learn more about the organisation, to work with different teams, to meet different people, it absolutely does improve retention. And I think also, it sends a message to individuals that perhaps have been with the business for a long time as well, that they still can get some,
it's 11 hours
time with the right people, but also they almost need to have the opportunity to understand the change and the growth that the business has been on. Quite often they don't hear the journey, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I've seen a lot of and actually I've been guilty of as well, where we've put together, great content for new people starting, and then individuals that have been in the business since day one, they're not aware of it, they've never seen it, and actually showing them like how far the business has come and where it's going, can create that real connection with them, and they should be feel proud of that and feel be part of that story.
Yeah, brilliant.
So how do you develop and manage the onboarding process? Tech, is there as an enabler, but what else to consider? So one thing that tech will not save you. So I think it's really important that you're very clear in terms of what your onboarding process is. Bringing in a onboarding framework or a new technology is not going to help you with your process. I think it's really important to have almost like a process map in terms of what are all the touch points of your onboarding process, because there's actually about 75 aspects that, on an onboarding checklist that needs to be created. And I believe that only once you've got that all mapped out and who's responsible for what, can you bring in a great tech solution for onboarding. Otherwise, I think you run the risk of bringing in technology without actually identifying who is doing what in the onboarding process, how you can optimize it, and you can run the risk of perhaps not leveraging that technology in terms of its output, but also making sure that there's investment in it going forward. Absolutely believe that you need to have a robust and automated process. It's so easy for people to drop like little things. I'm sure many of you have witnessed things where perhaps people turn up and their desk isn't ready, or they haven't got a laptop, or just as they're going about to sign their contract, finance know nothing about the role. And so making sure that, yet again, I think back to when you're actually taking the brief, that you're thinking about that individual's starting and runway. I don't know how many of you have actually got budget in place for onboarding technology at the moment. Most of the organizations that I've worked with, because they are starting up and scaling up or going through massive transformation, I suppose it's often the last, the talent acquisition and people team is often the last area that's invested in. So there are ways that you can use tools such as Asana or Trello, which are project management tools that are not too high in terms of the cost point of view, where you can demonstrate the benefits of having technology in place. And also why you need to invest more in a proper onboarding solution. Also, I think that when you're looking at tech as an enabler, it's really important to think about how you can adapt that technology as you go along. So if you've got an onboarding solution, if there's a content element to it, making sure that it's easy for you to adapt that content, because what you don't want is something that's kind of like quite clunky and cumbersome. You want to make sure that the technology that you're bringing in is agile and is really improving the experience for all, but also is delivering data for you, so that you can pull out key points that you're going to be able to share with the business to demonstrate the value that a really structured onboarding program has. one thing that people have started to ask me recently, especially the rise of neurodiversity and perhaps multi-generational workforces, is should we be creating different onboarding processes for different employees? And my answer is that yes, absolutely. I think that when you're onboarding graduates, they should have a very different experience to perhaps a group of sales managers, to an executive who's joining your business. So I think there are some core fundamentals of your onboarding program that are consistent. But then I think as the elements that you can personalize for different employees is quite important. So for instance, a graduate will need more help on the day-to-day things and the commercials, and perhaps need a little bit more investment. So how many of you have got a different onboarding process for freelance or contingency labour?
Do you have the same process, or do you not have a process? There is no process for contingent workforce.
Okay, so normally would that mean that if you had freelancers or contingent workforce joining your business, they would go into the same onboarding program as your permanent staff?
Or no, maybe they just don't get onboarded. Is that what you guys are saying? Yeah.
Okay. So at all?
Looks like it.
I think
okay.
They're not owned by the recruitment function.
Okay, so contingent workforce isn't owned necessarily by the recruitment function. It's owned by perhaps the different business unit.
You've got a contract for exchange team, so they were similar thing.
Yeah.
Use the same processes for different timelines, different graphics.
Okay. Yeah. So that was Accenture saying that. So they've obviously got different contracts with different people, so different business units really. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I think that's good to hear, because I've seen in some businesses where I've seen a freelancer who might only be in the business for a month sit down and go through like the entire first day learning about the business and being paid to kind of get on board, and that's a concern because it's a real loss of money and time. Also, I think that one thing we don't think about is people who are returning to the business. So if you have people who've been on leave, or mums that are coming back from maternity leave, or individuals coming from different offices, making sure that they have got a different onboarding process, because they probably don't need to go through things in so much depth, but they still at the same time need to be welcomed back and to have the right information and to be aware of what's happening. And I think there'll be more and more of that happen. I also personally believe that with the rise of the gig economy, and also with a lot of business perhaps being outsourced and offshored more, I think we'll probably see a lot of automated onboarding programs. So that's one thing that we used to do when I was at AKQA, because we had about, at one point in time, 60% of our workforce was contingent when we were going through huge growth. So we automated all of that. So they kind of like onboarded themselves before they came into the business on their first day. And that was covering off all, I suppose, as well, the technical orientation pieces, so like health and safety, etc., like that. And also we used to work with offshoring partner, Cyclum. We used to make sure that everyone who was working on our account, they had an onboarding experience, so they understood the business. Any questions around that at all?
No.
Okay. So any tips for shareholder, hiring manager, buy-in? I think that quick wins, I'm not sure how many of you do this, but first of all, I would start, if you go back to those data points on the first page, if you could look at how you could map those into, how many of you are delivering dashboards into your business on a monthly basis across your people? So in terms of like how many people are starting, how many people are leaving, how many open roles have you got, what's your absenteeism?
Yeah, has everyone got that? A few people, not a huge host of people.
Okay, so a great way of getting the leadership to buy into an onboarding initiative and to get you investment for the right tools and technology would be to start calling out the metrics in your business and showcasing to them and saying, look, you know, we have X% of people that are leaving within 3 months. If we were to start delivering a structured, formalized onboarding program, I'm confident that we can move the needle to Y, and actually monetizing that for them. So I don't think the leadership are always aware of how much it costs to, one, hire someone, and to two, backfill them, and how it's crucial for them to, one, invest their time, but also to financially and invest in the operations of the business to make sure that people have a good onboarding experience. So having those metrics will certainly help. There's small kind of like tips as well that I can send out afterwards that work quite well, and where you can show an improvement automatically in your onboarding program without throwing loads of money at it. So small things like perhaps like asking your new starters to record, what's been great for them about their onboarding experience, and what are potentially areas of development, things that they found really hard. Also asking them to, do any of you do entrance interviews at the moment?
Entrance? Yeah, a couple of people.
Yeah, so I think marrying up the entrance interviews to the exit interviews, you'll be quite surprised that there's some consistent themes. And then feeding that back up into the leadership. These are consistent issues that we're hearing, where we need to, get better at what we're doing. Also, having making it easy for the leadership as well to get behind onboarding. So doing welcoming messages for them, giving them the opportunity to get in front of the new starters. So I've worked in businesses where from day 1 to month 6, there has been a timetable of activities that involve the leadership, either doing what we used to call like speed dating, like if you're outside technology, perhaps the CTO would sit down with those new starters and explain to them what the tech stack is, where we're going, what our vision is. Their sales director would explain to them the market that we're in, who our competitors are, what our goals are for the year. So just asking them as well to invest more time in it. Buddy programs. How many of you run buddy programs at the moment?
Right. Yeah, good number. Yeah.
Yeah. How many of you do hiring for your buddies? They actually train them how to be a good buddy.
Training for buddies? Less so.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that if you're asking someone to kind of like, be that person's mentor, they sometimes buddies can get faced with quite a lot of, I've had some come to me before and they're like, God, I've just like, this has just come to individuals to share this with me. I have no idea what to say. So I think making sure that your buddies are having training in terms of like what their role is, what the deliverables and asks of them are, and also, when to come and ask for help. And then also following that up with a survey to rate your buddy. So making sure that the buddies are doing their jobs, and then recognizing and rewarding them accordingly. So then it almost becomes something that's aspirational across the business. What else is I going to mention? Simple things as well, just like, you know, one page Canva document that's on everyone's desktop when they start with a map. Or, you know, here's the stationery cupboard is, because I think what we do is, and I realize this more so myself because I'm constantly going into businesses with a fresh pair of eyes, is that everyone tends to give you signposts. So like, oh, if you go here, you'll find that. So actually spending the time to, you know, take new starters through that, actually maybe walking them to the stationery cupboard, or if not, recording a little video, or, you know, giving them a map. I think sometimes we don't think about how difficult it is just to, you know, work out the basics. And that's what slows down people's productivity. But also, if you know, can't find your way around the office and everyone that you talk to kind of just like points their fingers, it's not really a great experience, and somewhere that you feel that you want to invest and stay with for, you know, for a long time. Also, there's some great examples out there of companies that do, you know, like awesome onboarding programs, like Booking.com, Zappos, Lever, Buffer. Netflix is a good one as well. I know everyone calls out Netflix, but actually their onboarding program constantly changes in line with their culture. And they actually map that to, what's quite interesting is they look for who's not working out in their business, who are they exiting, and that tends to change who they hire and the qualities that they look for and how they onboard them. So that's probably been a bit of a whistle-stop tour for you, but hopefully given you some insights, and more than happy to send out all of the notes that I've made around this to you afterwards. And then if there's any toolkits or templates that you need, I'm more than happy to help.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Liz.